Alright everyone, it's time for the Occult, video number 245, the Occult Jesus, which is something that I've had several people message me about. It's interesting because in a couple days I'm going to be debating E. Michael Jones, as of the upload date, of course, if you're watching this years from now. Obviously, it's in the past already. It's amazing how time operates. It's really linear. But I suspect, because of his Christian beliefs, he has a conception of Jesus that is cosmologically different from this one. But I'd like to lay out sort of my understanding as someone who I've been a broadly sort of liberal Christian, like a mainline kind of Protestant Christian. That was how I was raised, sort of going to church on Christmas and Easter, not much more. I've been more religious in the non-denominational, broadly Protestant sense. I've gone to a few Catholic services back long ago when I was in Texas specifically. Not many churches there that aren't Catholic anyway to go to. Let's just face reality. And I've been, I'm a self-proclaimed Satanist or atheist, and then also pagan and occultist. So I've studied all of these things. One thing that I believe in one's spiritual journey is that it should be a journey. It's not like, oh, you're born into a church, you stay in that church, you die in that church, you get buried in that churchyard. That's boring. I think it's unenlightened. I think that's for people who want to take the work that's been done by other people and just appropriate it and not have to do any work themselves. For people who have more intellectual vigor, who like to read a lot and explore a lot and think about things, I don't think that can be fulfilling. I don't really think it matters what religion you're born into. I feel happy that I was born in the United States, where that is more culturally acceptable, especially lately, as opposed to in some countries where you get beheaded or whatever for questioning your deity. Now, anyway, I wanted to talk about the sort of understanding I've come to with regards to the topic of this particular character. Now, of course, first and foremost, let me say, I do not think that there has ever been a human who has been the offspring of a disembodied cosmic ghost. I don't believe in that. The fact that you have Muffadora meme for suggesting that, I think, is very funny, because it's a very strange thing to actually claim has happened, especially when you don't have an observable proof or set of evidence for that. A lot of it boils down to just philosophical banter and sophistry, really, you could say. I believe, though, that there was a central character involved here. That is, that the idea, like the fedora idea that Jesus was just totally non-existent, it's a Roman fairy tale to subjugate people, I think there had to have been some sort of core truth there. And the explanation of the Victorian occultist is, of course, that story, while based in part on truth, has its earlier origins in paganism, which is essentially a solar fable. It's essentially a series of statements of astrological lore and mystic lore in the philosophical sense that have been reused over time because they're fitting, they're important in a human sense. Like if we look at books, the way in which epics or novels are written, there aren't that many actual stories. You can flesh them out differently. The characters change, the settings change, but the basic idea, the protagonist is born, and they're going to be a heroic protagonist. And this same basic story is used over and over. They rise up to face adversities. In their darkest hour, it looks like they might lose, but then through either a friend comes and helps them, or because of their own fortitude or the intercession of the gods, somehow they overcome that final challenge, become a true hero, and the end. That basic idea is used over and over because it's effective. What I've come to the conclusion of is that there's a similar thing, that Jesus is an occult symbol, largely, that simply was adapted because it worked. It had worked before, it's worked since then. There have been, like Mormonism. Mormonism is a mid-1800s variant of Christendom that's been slightly modernized because, in the time there was a little bit more technology around and Joseph Smith wanted to make money. There never was a Mormon Jesus wandering around in North America. This is considered ludicrous by most mainstream Christians. What I am saying is that there's no difference, and that it's just as ludicrous to suggest that a Jesus in the form of the Old Testament wandered around in Judea. It's the same thing. It's the same basic claim. It's just a different time period. People are born into it and they just sort of accept it. I've become less anti-religious over time, though, because, for a lot of people, especially the more mainline religious people, if it gives them hope, if it gives them courage or helps them in their life, makes them feel better about themselves, fucking go do it. Makes you happy, do it. You're not victimizing anyone just by believing in Jesus Christ. And I would say the historical figure, at the core anyway, would have been a mystic. I don't believe that Jesus at the core as a central figure was the Son of God or a magician or, doing voodoo or something. I think what you've got here is someone who took advantage of the learning of the East that was widely available in the eastern part of the Roman Empire, would have been available if he was literate, which it seems, according to tales, he would have been. He absorbed what amounts to Zoroastrian and other similar logic from Eastern groups. The Romans were great connoisseurs of foreign religions. Oh, they loved it. They would make little, like the Mithraism was the cult religion of most Roman soldiers at a time. Mithraism could have become the main religion of the Roman Empire quite easily. It became Christianity instead. Now, there was a lot of resistance, I think, among a lot of Roman centurions who liked their Mithra a little bit, and all of these other figures. They had Babylonian understanding. The Egyptian religions were definitely in vogue. Traditional Greek and Roman religions, the emperor worship cult, the religions from the north, certain Scandinavian aspects, and Celtic religion. These were all sort of fused together, and there's a lot of overlap between them. Now, some people would say, well, they overlap because they adapted one another. I'm saying that they overlap because the same basic tale, the same basic symbology works on the human mind and tends to evolutionarily retain itself within cultural evolution. The central figure, though, the central Jesus that could have existed would have to be mortal, because there's no reason to believe that that one special time, that one religion got it right to the exclusion of all others. Every other religion, every other god is totally fake. Don't worry, though, yours is totally real. I don't find that logical. I like to subjugate spirituality to the basic rudiments of reason. I think that we're dealing with a mystic who understood and was initiated, indeed, into certain orders, who had a great deal of philosophical learning, and was altogether. If you read literally the words of Jesus in the Bible, I would like to point out that a lot of Christians ignore it completely. The basic tale of Jesus, if you really take it literally, is be like me. No, you're not going to be perfect. Stop judging people. Stop, don't use the government to enforce your religion, because you can't. It's going to corrupt it and turn it into a very legalistic thing, which we've seen happen in Christendom over and over again. Feed the poor, feed the orphans, stop judging each other, avoid conflict, and preach this basic path, and everything will be okay. It's the way to enlightenment. The heaven that is promised essentially is the improvement of the earth, togetherness and love, and it fulfills the basic command guidelines of the Judeo-Christian deity, which is to love thy neighbor and things of that nature, essentially being a good brethren and taking care of others and being benevolent instead of a shit fuck, to not be a Pharisee, to not be so legalistic. Those basic set of commands, though, are openly ignored by most Christians. I've found that the more religious Christians tend to be remarkably judgmental compared to the less religious ones. The less religious ones, though, they love to quote scripture in regards to whatever vice they happen to be unwilling or unable to give up. Very interesting times. By the way, the idea of some golden age mythology that Christendom was more pure 1,000 years ago or something, no, not really. It's nothing fell or degenerate about modernity any more than there was about antiquity. It's same shit, different asshole. I wonder, were there natural food enthusiasts in ancient times like, oh, you shouldn't store your food in clay because it wasn't made by nature? It fired in a kiln. No, you should store it in a wooden vessel that you crudely hand-carve because it's better for you. Dionysus commands it or something. I bet there was. I bet there were vegans back then, too. Diogenes, meanwhile, he threw his poop at people. I think he was more wise. Now, I think that there was an occult Jesus. This mortal figure had a great deal of learning and essentially told people to live a quasi-ascetic lifestyle of non-judgment on the fringes of society. What you got instead was a very legalistic, Romanized Catholicism that then killed off most of the authentic Christians of the era, and then has morphed since then. It's basically what you've gotten, which is regrettable, although it's more orderly. The Romans were very efficient at things. So it made more sense to them. The Romans were obsessed with legalism before Christianity existed, so it's not really Christianity that was the problem in that particular instance. It was certainly Romanism itself infecting Christianity. What you get is something vastly different from the mystic Gnostics or an Essene group, again, on the fringes of society with an initiate-based order and sacred scriptures from multiple cultures and literal occultism. I would say the Hermetic sort of writings that come later are closer to an authentic Christendom than the mainline sects at the time. Like in the medieval and Renaissance era, when you get occult Christian movements with a lot of symbology and hidden writing, the Stegonographia and so forth, that's more authentically Christian after a fashion in certain ways. So yeah, there's an Occult Jesus video for those of you who asked for one. It was quite a few people. That's about all. Peace out.